Just be assured I'm wearing wool, but I'm still cold. So. My name is Gene Harmon. Welcome to Camp Sumter. Can everybody hear me okay? All right. Hey, let me tell you a little bit about what I'm wearing, how the weapon's fired, a little bit about the guards here, and also about conditions inside. Well, first of all, this weapon right here is an 1858 Enfield. It is rifled. The effective range on this is several hundred yards. This is somewhat shorter. It's a two-bander. What I mean by that is there's two metal bands holding the barrel on. Most people are familiar with the longer 1853 Enfield, which has three bands on it. It comes up to about here. But the effective range on both of those is about the same. They are muzzle loaders, one shot at a time. The soldier was trained to load and fire 3 times in 1 minute. Last time I timed it, I got what? Just barely under
minute 30. Minute 3.
Minute 3, so just over. And I've been doing this since 1994. But I don't do it every day like they did. But it is rifled. Again, the effective range several hundred yards. That is why the casualties during the Civil War were so high. The tactics were still based on standing shoulder to shoulder, like they did in the Revolution, the War of 1812. The reason for that, the muskets they used then were smoothbores. Did not have any rifling. With a round ball, it didn't even fit snugly in the barrel. It would actually do this in the barrel as it went down. So when you fired it, if I was to fire, everybody see that cannon that's over there? If I was to fire a smoothbore musket at that cannon, I might hit it. More than likely it's going to go this way or that way, or it may hit the ground 10 yards in front of me. When a smoothbore is fired, that ball, before it ever gets out the end, is doing this. With these rifled muskets here, the mini ball is about this big, soft lead. Comes out of here like somebody throwing a perfectly spiraled football. And because it's soft lead, when it hits a body, it doesn't ricochet around like a modern bullet. It will go in and tear out everything in its path. A lot of amputations during the war. A lot of people could just assume that they didn't have the medical knowledge to restructure bone. Actually, they did. With a mini ball, it hits your arm, it takes out a huge chunk of bone. There's nothing left to put back together. God forbid, if you were to get hit by one of these mini balls from a musket like this now, you more than likely would lose that limb, either your arm or leg, in modern society because of the damage it does. A modern bullet, when it goes in, it may go in the shoulder, and it'll ricochet off bones and organs and anything else, muscle, and come out somewhere on the back or anywhere else on your body. Mini balls did not do that. Excuse me. Again, I said this is fired 1 round at a time. I'll show how that's done in a second. This here is a cartridge box. They would carry 40 rounds in here, 20 on the top, 20 on the bottom. When they run out of ammunition, they have to pull these tins out and move rounds up from the bottom to the top while you're under fire, while there's guys getting hit all around you, and move the rounds up to the top. They take one of these out. This is just a blank. There would be a mini ball in this round as well. Tear it with the teeth, and you had to have teeth to be in the infantry. I'm not kidding. So you can tear these cartridges. There were guys that would knock teeth out because they didn't want to go fight in the army. I said, that's okay. We can use you in the artillery. We pour the powder in. Push the ball in. Pull this ramrod out. This is the only way to push this ball to the bottom of the barrel. Without this, this is just a club. We turn it. This right here is a small cone. There's a small channel that goes from this down into the barrel. In here are small brass caps. Everybody pretty much has played with a cap gun in their life, right? Works on the same premise. This goes on the cone. This hammer, when it falls on that, which I'll do in a second, shoot that flame down in there, set the round off. Again, doing that 3 times in 1 minute while you're under fire. Anybody that doesn't like loud noises, you might want to cover your ears. The kids, it is loud, but not as loud as that over there. even though these are extremely deadly because of the rifling in them, the battlefield was covered with so much smoke, both from the rifles, artillery. A Civil War company at the beginning of the war numbered about 100 men. There were 10 companies to each regiment, 4 to 6 regiments per brigade, 4 to 6 brigades per division, 3 to 4 divisions per corps, 4 to 6 corps per army. I suck at math, I'm a historian, but that's thousands of men firing rifles and cannon on a battlefield. The smoke was intense. So a lot of the times you were shooting at just flashes in the smoke in the distance. There were instances where they were up close, but quite often there were several hundred yards in between the two battle lines. If they'd been able to see everything that they aimed at every time, casualties would have been higher, a lot higher. They are a slow trajectory weapon, meaning you may have seen movies where they have, either from the Old West or from a Civil War battle portrayed in the movies where somebody gets hit and they go flying backwards. No. More or less you get hit with this and you just slump to the ground. There are a few instances where they were very close. Is the only record of it actually doing that. At the Battle of Antietam, when the Federal line first came up on the sunken road, they were not aware the Confederates were there. Less than 50 yards away, the Confederate line rose up and fired a volley into the Federal line. Survivors of that said the front line was lifted off their feet and thrown into the rear rank from the sheer power of all that number of bullets hitting them. Now, when anybody served in the modern military? A few of you. You get close to the guys that are in your units, right? In your squad or your company. It's guys you usually didn't know until you actually joined the military. But at the time of the Civil War, you joined up with your brothers, your cousins, your fathers, your uncles. So when you went into battle, that's who you saw getting wounded and killed around you. People you've known all your life. Particular companies were raised from the same town, the same county. So you knew everybody was in the unit with you. It makes it a lot more traumatic. It also caused different communities, both north and south, to be almost void of adult men after the end of the war, especially here in the South. Excuse me. Now, talk about the rest of the stuff that I have on. What do you think, besides the weapons, because I put it down, what do you think is the most important thing that I have on?
Blanket. Canteen.
Who said canteen? Ding, ding. Water. One of the most important things for a soldier. It doesn't matter what era you're fighting in. You can go without food for a while, but you cannot go without water. So anytime they came to a creek, a lake, a river, anything with flowing water, they filled this back up. There's a problem with that though. They didn't know much about sanitation. So while you're filling up your canteen at the creek, there's 100 guys upstream doing other stuff in the water. That's how a lot of disease was transferred throughout the ranks, and that actually killed more men during the war than bullets. And that was a big factor of the casualty numbers inside that stockade, because they all had that one creek to get water from, and as they got sicker, the conditions got more deplorable, everything washed down into that water. It was their only source, and dysentery was a big killer in there. I talked about the belt some, with the cartridge box and cap box. Also on here is a poncho. It is rubberized canvas. Yes, they did do that back then. Also a lot of how the gear is carried by a soldier is personal preference. You may be familiar with pictures of what's called horse collar, where the blanket all was thrown over the shoulder. I used to carry, when I first started doing living histories, I carried my blanket rolled up in the poncho, thrown over my shoulder, which worked really good till the first event I did where a thunderstorm opened up on us while we're doing it. Well, in order to get the poncho on, I've got to take that off, unroll it, roll my blanket and extra shirts and socks that are in it back up while it's still raining, and then put the poncho on. In the process, my blanket got soaking wet. So now I carry it like this, tied with a leather thong. I can just quickly reach back, untie it, pull it out, and get it on without taking anything else off. Things you learn, I guess, as a soldier with any era, things you learn that makes things easier. Bayonets fits on the end of the rifle to where you can still fire with the bayonet on there. Now, this was used in combat, but initially when the troops first engaged. And hand-to-hand combat, even though it did happen, was not as common during the Civil War as a lot of people think. And when they did go in hand-to-hand combat, this will wound somebody. You see the triangular shape of it? It's designed to, when it's pulled out, the wound closes up. There's a lot more chance of it getting infected with it closed. But as dangerous and as foreboding as this might look coming at you, whereas this will wound, that will crack your skull wide open. And they were trained to use both ends of it. Outside of combat, they use this for other reasons as well. Anybody want to take a guess what?
Can opener?
Digging.
Firewood?
Definitely digging. In fact, this is bent just slightly for me digging a fire pit with it. They use it to dig trenches, fire pits, other things. Anybody want to take another guess at something?
Cooking.
Not a toothpick. Don't want to do that. Good guess though. Who said cooking? Definitely. Put your hand out away from the fire. Any other guesses?
Down here.
It's definitely stoking up the fire. Candle holder. You've seen one of these before, haven't you, ma'am? Works great as a candle holder. The wax actually pops off the steel very easily. Any more guesses before I tell you my favorite use for it? Yes, sir.
Cutting firewood?
No, not quite sharp enough to cut firewood, but good guess.
Hunting.
No, it would be a good reason, but when you have thousands of men moving into an area, the deer are long gone. After a battlefield, you've got thousands of bodies to bury. Any of you ever seen a deer that's been hit by a car on the side of the road in August? A human body does the same thing. And of course, the men didn't want to grab hold of the bodies themselves, and more than likely, because they've been out there floating, go to just grab it, and things are going to come off the body while you're trying to drag it. So, they picked up hundreds of extra bayonets off the battlefield, stick it into a fire, bend it into a hook, and then use that hook to put in the body and drag it to be buried. I like all the guys go, cool, and the women are going, ugh.
That's true.
This is my bedroll, my bed. When the soldiers on the march, their house is on their back. These tents will sleep about 4 to 6 men, but that's only when you're in winter quarters or training camps. Otherwise, your house is on your back. In this, I have extra shirt, socks, and letters or pictures from home. Again, how it's carried is personal preference. I mentioned the horse collar. I don't like them myself. They're too hot as well. Some gentlemen like the knapsack, which is a Civil War version of a backpack. I've tried that also. I don't like the way it pulls, across here, but some guys like them. This is how I prefer to carry it. This strap is actually the sling from my rifle. Works much better to hold the blanket. The way it's balanced on your back, I really don't feel it. This bag is usually called a haversack. Usually kept cooked and uncooked rations in it. You did not want to have your personal belongings in here with food. That's why it was kept in the knapsack or blanket roll. In here I have a small frying pan, plate, and some silverware for cooking. Now imagine you've been captured on the battlefield, doesn't matter where. Either you've been wounded, or you're just plain exhausted. You cannot go on any further, or your position's been overrun. Now, that second one, being exhausted, I really didn't understand much before I started doing living histories and doing battle reenactments. Because you'd read certain passages and they'd word it something like, you know, such and such unit fought for a couple hours and they were spent for the day. I was like, 2 hours? Okay. I get out here running around for a couple hours doing a battle, I'm done. So anyway, you get captured and they immediately take the weapon away from you. Of course, they take the belt that's got the cartridge box and the cap box off of it. You know, they take that from you so you don't have any way to fight back. Then as you go further back toward the rear, you get handed off to different units. Well, soldiers in those units go, hey, I need a blanket. I need a haversack. You know, I need this, I need that. And pretty soon, you don't have much left. So a lot of the soldiers, when they got here to Andersonville, Camp Sumter, oh, and this scarf, they definitely would have taken it. So they get marched through those gates down there. This is all they got. And some of them, depending on what time of year, their jackets may have even been taken. So you come into a place like this, thousands of other men, there's no shelter. There's nothing to make shelter out of. You better hope that you've got some other guys from your unit to help take care of you. A lot of them are coming in here sick. Some still have wounds, maybe from a battle. It basically comes down to you taking care of each other in there. The conditions were awful. You heard, those of you who were down at the gate earlier, heard Jennifer talking about some of that. I mean, this isn't the first place it's happened. Hasn't been the last. Probably won't be the last. You think of things like the prison ships during the Revolutionary War, slavery itself, different places like the Bataan Death March, World War II, Hanoi Hilton in Vietnam, and different places throughout time, throughout eras. And a lot of people, they might say it's the nature of war, warfare itself. But is it? Instead of that, might it actually be the dark part of human nature that's in every one of us, that somehow gets unleashed when there's no limit on what you can inflict on another human being? And before y'all leave, I want you to take a look inside that building, because we do have a POW museum. And it kind of brings a lot of that to home as well. Any questions?
How much is all that?
The weapon itself is almost 10 pounds by itself, so we're talking about probably 20 extra pounds at least. And of course, when the wool uniform gets wet, it's even heavier. Now this is a wool cotton blend, which they did start having during the war. Wool uniform itself is very advantageous for a soldier. Doesn't seem like it. It seems to be very hot. But it actually remained a mainstay of military uniforms all the way up through the beginning of World War II. The big reason for that is the wool uniform actually breathes a lot easier than what you'd think, especially when it's wet. A lot of really hot events that we go to, a lot of the guys, before we go out on the battlefield, will soak their jackets completely. So as they're going through the battle and that is evaporating, it helps keep the body cool. Also, when you're in the middle of a battle, with these muskets, cannons going off, there's instances where brush was set on fire. You might be going through a burning field on your advance. Wool, burning embers go on a wool uniform, they brush right off. It will not catch on fire. That's a big reason for that.
The can on your sleeping wool, is that for food or candles or what's that?
It's called a boiler. I can cook in it, make coffee, cook food in it, and it's also strong enough you actually dig with it. So, multi-purpose.
Gene, over here.
Yes.
Can you fire your gun again?
You like that, huh?
Yeah, go ahead and fire my gun again. Mr. borrowing it. Yeah, I know.
and Mr.
Thank y'all very much for coming.
Thank you.